And hello, my party ghouls and goblins and all our fans in internet land and beyond. I am your host, David Estacado, and I'm here with another review. That's right, another review with my co-host, my buddy from another nutty, the one and only Rob the Movie Guy. What we got going on today, Rob?
What's going on, man? So today we are back with another film adaptation for Roald Dahl's book, which we have done from the part one of The Witches. We're going to get into the
part two
remake, the readaptation, however you want to look at it. This is going to be the film for The Witches 2020. Now, before we get into our thoughts, let's roll the trailer here real quick.
Roll it.
My story begins when I was a young boy.
You'll be comfy here in your mama's old room. I'd do anything for her to be here right now.
Grandma was a tough lady with a big heart. And little by little, she brought me out of my sadness.
Now if you feel that you can't go on, darling,
I didn't know it, but there was a dark shadow looming nearby. Witches. They're real, and they hate children.
Welcome.
What would you do if there were mice running all around this hotel?
I would call the exterminator.
You see, girls? He would exterminate those brats.
Rats. We would exterminate the rats.
I feared this was happening. Then here, that means a test is coming.
Ladies, I have a plan. Andro will transform a child into a mouse.
Whoa! Why are we mouses?
Mice?
Whatever!
Grandma, it's me!
Is that you, boy? We'll never let you get away with your filthy, evil plot.
Who's gonna stop me?
Doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, so long as somebody loves you.
You wouldn't happen to be carrying around a mouse on your person, now would you?
A mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Why on earth would I be carrying around a mouse?
There you have it. The trailer for the Witches 2020 film. You're kind of, is it a remake? Is it a redo? Like Robert Zemeckis said, it's more of a retelling of the original source material from the book. And clearly, from taking a look at the trailer and watching the film, it really is. They kind of took the original source material, changed it up, but they stuck close to the story. But we'll get into that, Rob. You want to get into, your thoughts of the film real quick, or?
Well, I didn't even know this movie was even coming out until someone I'm not sure if it was you that brought it to my attention and said, hey, there's a remake from this film, from the original film. Let's check this out. I don't recall how that actually was introduced to me, but I had no idea that was even in the works, or let alone it was even coming out. And I did not see a single trailer for it. I only saw some images that were online, but that's the closest that I was ever really invested into seeing what how the film was going to look. Overall thoughts.
Well, let's get into the plot a little bit, because they changed the plot from the original book and movie. This actually takes place in 1968 in Alabama, I believe, where a young boy is pretty much taken in by his grandmother, and takes care of him after he finds out his parents pass away. He ends up living with him, and you kind of see what that relationship going on, and then eventually take a trip to a hotel. After they find out that witches are real, and the discovery of this meeting of grand witches and their plot to kill and destroy children, and eventually their plans and plot to stop them from initiating this plan after being turned into mice with the help of the grandmother, who is an ex-witch hunter. So they changed a little bit here. They changed the location and the time, which I think adds a little bit to the story. I liked that they did that. And it adds a little bit more of a, I want to say, it changes it in a good way. The atmosphere, the tone really, really helps out. Especially we were talking about earlier before the recording, just the setting in itself really kind of helped with the story, push the story along, especially early parts of the film, which I think were the best parts of the film.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the changes that were made, including the characters that we are introduced here. I'm gonna kind of make some comparisons with the original film that came back out in 1990 because, believe it or not, this movie, this remake or readaptation, whatever you want to call it, comes out 30 years after the first one, because the first one came out in 1990. Here we are in 2020. So 30 years later, we've got a new film based on the source material, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. I wasn't sure if this film came out around the same time as the original one, so I have no idea. But fact of the matter is that we get introduced to our characters in this movie. It starts off with a narration by none other than Chris Rock, which I did not know at all was in this movie, at all whatsoever. I was actually surprised when I heard, "Hey, what's going on?" I was like, "Is that Chris Rock?" And then the more he talks, I'm like, "Oh, okay. I think I know what's going on here," because there's a lot of there are a lot of high-powered, a lot of famous people in this movie. As we saw Anne Hathaway playing the head witch. We have Octavia Spencer, who was great in the movie. Stanley Tucci. I had no idea that Chris Rock was in the film, but the film certainly has an appeal to bring in some star power to get people interested in the movie, especially with the direction of Robert Zemeckis, who was famous for doing Forrest Gump, the Back to the Future trilogy, Castaway, and several other movies as well that were hit cinematic films that really have an impact on pop culture. And this man directed this movie. I thought, okay, hopefully it'll be good.
Yeah.
I was hesitant about it.
And yeah, you exactly what I was going to get into. Like, I had so much high hopes. You had Robert Zemeckis. So when I heard that, I was like, I want to see some Death Becomes Her. A little bit of some Death Becomes Her, because you also have Guillermo del Toro on as producer and assisting with the writing, as well as Alfonso Cuarón, who's also on there. Both great writers, all great directors who come from a horror
fantasy element
background, especially with Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso. They come from a history of writing dark settings and dark fantasy stories. You have Pan's Labyrinth, you have Tu Mamá También, these Mexican anthology series,
Chronos,
Backbone, Zemeckis' Death Becomes Her. So I had so much high hopes with these directors and writers. I think there's going to be, okay, I want some kind of a dark fantasy that these guys are known for, and we didn't really get that, though. And that's kind of where it kind of fell apart for me. Now, mind you, the first half of the film, you really get that emotional impact and that relationship between the grandmother and the grandson. You see that relationship build up, which is fantastic.
Yep.
You kind of see them kind of learn how to grieve and deal with loss, and how to pretty much overcome, how to be able to move on and from that loss. And you could tell that they did a great job writing that, but after that, it just kind of fell apart, which we'll get into that.
Well, let's also talk about with the actors portraying these characters. We got Octavia Spencer playing the grandmother, who you mentioned is great in film. I think she does a really good job. She definitely is not copying the previous actress who plays the grandmother in the original film, and they're taking this whole different approach with this character, which I thought was a nice touch. And there's definitely some new added elements to her character being into some sort of making medicines from I forgot what it was that she was making it from, but she was
she was witch hunter, and knowledgeable in that spiritual stuff. Yeah,
they definitely get more into that with her. And she's definitely she in this film, she's definitely much more religious person, and then in her first movie. But here, she's definitely clearly influencing her religious background into this character, or into the story rather. And I thought the actor who played their grandson, I thought he was really good too. And there's a problem that I have not necessarily with the actor playing the young kid, but really with Chris Rock, which we'll get into more in the negatives. There's a lot of negatives that we have about this movie that you and I know for a fact agree upon. So I'm interested in hearing what other things you may have you want to get into. But the character, the actor playing this character of the grandson, I thought he was great. I really did enjoy his performance. When you saw that he was sad, I felt for him because he does a good job in conveying that sense of loss and that sense of being alone because he had lost his parents in the beginning of the movie. And the grandmother's trying to connect with him, tries to loosen him up, and then she has that really tough love approach to him as well too. That you got to get over it. Life moves on. This is what your parents would want you to do. And I appreciated that aspect of the relationship where she's trying to show him, hey, it's okay. And then we also get the introduction of the little mice that she buys for her grandson to build a relationship, to try to reconnect with something, so that way he could learn to move on and develop a relationship with something that he could care, and he definitely does with this mice. And we also get more of a background of the grandmother's history with the witches, and it actually goes more in depth with that, which I actually did appreciate. And having her tell that story, not from the very beginning in the first 5 minutes of the film, but just kind of spread throughout, because you're seeing the sequences of the relationship of these characters, and then certain talking points about the witches, which I thought was very well done. And so I appreciated that approach. I'm sure you also have some other things you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, especially like I said, like the first half of the movie, like I guess the first good part, it was fantastic. The build up of the relationship between the grandmother and the grandson, the stories that she kind of build up, and kind of like you get a little bit more of backstory between her and the witches and the witch himself. There was some good body horror stuff. We won't go into it, but the kids being turned into animals and stuff, and you kind of see that transformation slowly happen with some of the body horror elements, as she kind of realizes she's getting turned into this animal, and then the reveal later on that she was still kind of trying to be friends with her and kind of help her out. Eventually. Was kind of like a good setup to what they did with the older film, but they kind of stuck a little bit closer, kind of like, well, she experienced this, and since then she's kind of been known to kind of root out these witches and able to tell her grandson how to do the same.
Yeah, and for me, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the portrayal of the head witch by Anne Hathaway. Now, as you and I discussed in the first, the original film, that we thought that Angelica Houston really stole the show. I mean, she's fantastic from the moment that she walked into the room to the very last shot that we get of her. And we see her transformation of her real appearance as a witch, and then going back into her more everyday look to adapt with society. In this movie, I was curious to see how they're going to pull that off when you get that reveal of this head witch. I was thinking that maybe they might take an approach where she's going to be completely CGI, and maybe there'll be a little bit of practical effects mixed in there. That's what I was kind of hoping for, at least to get some sort of real sense of like horror, like, okay, this person is not to be messed with. She is the big boss in this room. But instead, she looks just like everybody else. They have the Glasgow smile, which I thought was interesting. Whenever they open up, they kind of just spreads out open, and more teeth start coming out from the sides. I thought that was interesting.
Kind of very Melina, almost kind of that uncanny valley kind of feel to it. But that's where I was kind of let down, because again, knowing that Guillermo del Toro, Alfonso, and Robert Zemeckis are more into practical effects, I was expecting a little bit more from that reveal, which unfortunately was revealed prior to the movie, so it kind of was disappointing, because I was expecting to see more than that. But we didn't.
No, and that's the thing too. Even with the grandmother going a little more deeper about the history of the witches and the real life appearances, and how they can, when they smell, their nose can spread out, like be up to like 8 meters in diameter, which I thought that was interesting. And we get to see that in the movie here too, with Anne Hathaway smelling out the kids in that conference hall. Those were some interesting elements that were not, if I remember correctly, were not in the first film, as far as like how they were able to sniff them out, and what the features would come about and sniffing out the children. So those little details I thought certainly worked, and there's a funny little sequence where she's snuffing out the kid, and you can see that nose nostril grow. I thought that was one of the cooler sequences in that movie. So the fact that Anne Hathaway smelling a child and seeing that nostril grow out the way that it did.
And let's just give it to Anne Hathaway. She does a good job. She does. She
Okay.
plays the role well, but there's something that she's missing from. I don't know if it was the writing or the way that she portrayed the character, like the accent, but you could tell that she was owning the role. And there are some scenes where it works, and there are other scenes that she's just missing something, where it was just over the top, but wasn't like you didn't feel that regalness, or you did see that, but you didn't. Just like Angelica Houston did in the original film, she was over the top, but it was elegant almost, or kind of like still almost in a regal kind of sort of way.
Yeah.
Where it was kind of subtle. Where like, oh, this is a very over top of the performance, but it's kind of like, it made sense for what she was trying to do. Well, Anne Hathaway does a great job. She owns the role. There was just something missing from the performance. Like there was something missing at least for the head witch, anyways.
Well, I'm mixed about her performance in the film. Now, not to say she was terrible, because she definitely was not terrible, but I didn't have that impact from her at all. There was no moments where she stole. And really, the only actor in the movie that really, I guess you could say, stole the film, but really is by default, is Octavia Spencer and the actor that played her grandson. I thought they really were the really positives that I can really take away from the movie. Anne Hathaway was good. I'm not saying she's terrible, as I said before, but I didn't have that impact from her at all whatsoever. And even the new approach with how to show the witches and how they really look in their real appearances.
It was creepy. It was creepy.
It had some moments like that, but it just didn't have. I mean, Angelica Houston was creepy. Okay, that woman was creepy in that heavy makeup.
Let's say freaky. Anne Hathaway is more creepy than freaky. I mean, even when she like pulled out the worm and like ate it, that was like, okay,
that was a nice little touch. I thought
that was a nice touch.
I didn't have that impact from her like I did with Angelica Houston, and quite frankly, it was just another performance from her that I thought she did good in, but it wasn't impactful like I've seen her in other movies where you really see, okay, this woman can act, but this one was just, she's good and it's just another paycheck for her. But not to take away from anyone's performance here and the work that they've done, because everyone does put in a good work in this movie, I believe, but something, you're right, something was missing from the film, and it didn't really necessarily have that charm that the original film had carry into this movie here. But one other thing I also want to point out, too, where we also get the introduction of the hotel manager played by Stanley Tucci, who's back there, as you can see. And he's good. He's a good actor. That's about it. That's all I can really say about the man. Honestly, he didn't really have much of an impact at all whatsoever. I mean, he definitely had some nice moments, but it wasn't something that stuck out for me. Even Rowan Atkinson's character in the original film, although he wasn't the standout character, but his ability to narrate or to act in those scenes, especially with those awkward moments, he does it so well. Here, Stanley Tucci definitely does a good job, but it doesn't have that quirkiness that Atkinson carries here. And I understand these are two different actors, two different styles of acting, especially for what they wanted to tell for this story here. I get that, but something about that particular performance felt a little underwhelming for me. And this is coming from a really, really good actor. I do believe he's a very good actor in virtually everything he's ever been in.
The straight man, especially against Anne Hathaway's character, and how he was kind of easily persuaded by both female leads, which I thought was great. A great little. But there was so much they could have done. Like Anne Hathaway's character, I would have been great as a kind of a Karen almost, like an evil witch Karen. I was hoping to see a little bit more, not just more over the top, but a little more evil or strictness. It was something that was missing from the performance. I feel like that would have sealed the deal for me.
I definitely didn't feel the threat with her. I
think that was there's more menacing. I didn't really get to the menacing part of it. She didn't seem like a threat, just kind of like she was there.
Yeah.
But that being said, there was a tone of the movie that they were going for that I was hoping that we would have seen that kind of like I feel like it dropped the ball like after they got into the hotel, and I think it's really once you got to the hotel, it just kind of went flat for me.
Yep. Yeah. Well, here's the thing too with the really good first half of the movie. I would say that it definitely were the best parts, but even then, even with the very little time that we get with, as far as the introduction from the original film with the original two actors in the first film, I thought that you get the introduction, but you felt the connection. Not to say that you don't feel it with them. I'm not saying that, but the problem is that I noticed for me that I picked up on this movie as I was watching is that in the first movie, the connection you felt pretty much right off the bat because they're conversing. They've already had this established conversation that they've already gotten into. You're hearing the narration with the movie, starting off with the grandmother talking about her experience with the witches, and then you've seen the imagery. You have that relationship has already been established there, and you believe it because the conversation they're having seems so genuine, and you can see their interaction with one another. You can see that they care for one another. Not to say they don't have that here, but it seems like they worked harder to establish that, to set the tone of the relationship. Okay, I love you, grandmother. I thank you. I know you're sad. Tough love. It worked. It really did. But I thought the original film did that one better, where you don't have all that time to build up to that relationship. They just established it, and it worked well from the very moment that you see them on screen. And here, it seemed like they worked harder for that, and something about that didn't sit well with me. But again, not to take away from their performance, not to take away that was actually one of the better parts of the movie. But for me, like I said before, it seemed like too much work for something that didn't necessarily have to take too much work in developing here. I don't know if you felt that way about that. Now that if I brought that to your attention,
sort of, kind of like you could tell that there's a difference between the relationships here between the grandmother from the first film and the second film.
Yeah.
But I did like the build up for it though. That because there was such a build up for that relationship, seeing where it was going to go. It like this movie, just that beginning part of the movie, seeing that relationship grow, and that relationship as it was going, where it was headed. Had that been the rest of the movie, and kind of see that relationship go, it would have been a great film. And they missed out on that. They really did. The tone just kind of changed a little bit here. But yeah,
I felt like you were kind of watching like two different films from what you saw in the first half and what you're getting in the second half. I do agree with you on that. Well, let me ask you this: we've seen the witches in this movie. Obviously, we get the introduction of the head witch by Anne Hathaway. How did you feel about the other witches in this movie? Because in the first film, we do get a bit of them, and you have some interactions with them, but you certainly felt like these were the underlings, and you felt that they are beneath this head witch. Here, to me personally,
I like the first witch that tried to get him in the beginning of the film. And she looked like an ordinary person, but once she started talking, she had that weird, creepy voice.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, that worked. And then they instantly left, and it kind of built up like, oh, the witch is a real situation. We got to get out of Dodge. It eventually just ended up at the convention, anyways.
Did you felt that worked for the movie? Because here's the thing for me. I felt like in the original film, remember we get the first witch that the grandson interacts with. She doesn't have that voice. She's not like, hello, my son. She doesn't have any of that approach of like showing that she's a witch. She talks normally. She interacts. A little suspicious, of course, but there's no added elements to make her seem like she is a witch. Therefore, watch out for her. Whereas in this movie, they added those elements like, hello, my son.
I enjoyed it because it kind of gives a kind of menacing tone to it.
Okay, so you appreciated that approach.
I appreciated it.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason I thought it worked, but I was like, it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm being biased to the first film because I thought the first film, thinking about it now, did it so much better for me personally. Not to say these guys.
I agree. It did do a lot better. Though there's some things that this movie did better than the last movie.
Let's talk about that. What things that you thought they did better here?
I just didn't feel like the relationship built up at the beginning of the movie. Though I feel more like in the first film, you kind of get a little bit more background and more story. But again, this is kind of more of a retelling than anything. So I understand where you're coming from comparing the two. But considering the time frame that this was taking place and that feel and that look, lots of colors throughout this movie, that really popped out. And that's one thing, like the tone kind of. Okay, we can get into the negatives at this point. Where the colors were great and the pop, it had such a pretty film to look at. But I think really the tonal thing really had to do, especially where it started off, was Chris Rock narrating. The way he narrated the movie really kind of took the tone out of it, because it looked like it was going to be more of a comedy than a film or anything like that. Any other kind of fantasy film. He was really over the top with his narration. If he toned it down a little bit, because he can, he has done it.
Yeah.
And it sounded a lot like Everybody Hates Chris.
Yeah, here's the thing too. That's what I was getting at before about the portrayal of the actor who plays the younger version of Chris, which is that the character doesn't have that persona of like, hey, what's going on? He doesn't have that really, I guess you could say, aggressive attitude. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but the Chris Rock approach basically is what I'm getting at. He's much more subtle and he's much more analytical. He's very calm and he has a really approachable demeanor. And not to say that Chris Rock doesn't, but when you hear the narration, he's like, and then my grandma said this and she did that. It just that in your face type of a voice. It's complete disconnect of what we saw from this character's portrayal in the beginning of the movie, well, actually throughout the film, and then hearing his voice throughout the movie talking about the events that occurred. Yeah. It was like two different personalities altogether, and you don't see that transition from where he started to how he ended up.
Yeah, because I was saying, like, you see the kid build up. You see him start to opening up and become more into his own as the movie progressed. Yeah. But not as much as when he's narrating it. And I wish there was kind of more of a build-up to show that off.
I agree.
Especially with, okay, now I understand why he is, because he's kind of grown up, he's mature, blah, blah. But no, it wasn't as subtle as I thought it would be. And it kind of just messes with the change, especially with being such a... It's a pretty movie to look at. It really is. The use of color here, and the brightness, it really helps with that kind of showing how zany, in a sense, the story is. But it also, the charm is kind of there, but it's not as charming as the original. The original did it better. That I really would like to say that.
Well, let's also talk about some of the other negative aspects of the movie, which is, for me, the transition. I'm not sure if you mentioned it before, and forgive me if you did, and I'm repeating it, but in the original film, the transition that the kids go through where they turn into mice, you can see that as they're transitioning into the mice, their face changes, and it looks so creepy and so freaky looking. It's just so zany. In this film, it doesn't really have that. It's more. It
kind of does. You kind of get some body horror with like the tumors and everything, and then they get. But it's not as effective as it was.
No, that's where I was getting at. I see where you're coming from, and I would say that I would agree with you, but I didn't like the direction they took with that transformation there. It didn't have that, because when you see the kid just turning into a mice, he just looks so weird and creepy looking. I can see how scary that could be for a child seeing it, especially a really young child seeing a kid eating candy, and all of a sudden he's turning into a mice. It could have that effect on you. In this movie, there's none of that at all whatsoever here for me. Not to say that that wasn't the best way to go about it, but I just don't know if it really was
effective.
It wasn't effective at all for me personally. But I do get where you're coming from. I just don't necessarily subscribe to that. It was good. It was effective in that regard.
No, I agree. Like, I liked that they chose. It was kind of like a little body horror. Like I said, the tumors start popping up, and it was gross looking to an extent, but it was all CGI. I think I wish they would have done a little bit more practical effects. Again, is me going back to, these are guys that are known for using practical effects, and there wasn't much used except for in Hathaway's face and maybe some of the looks of some of the witches, but that was it. And I was really hoping for like a mix of these guys really working together. This is almost an all-star team here.
Yeah.
You really get a great sci-fi thriller, heck, even a good horror anthologies. I really want to see Robert Zemeckis do a horror anthology, especially after seeing, Death Becomes Her was kind of like a horror fantasy.
Well, he was one of the producers of Tales from the Crypt, so he
Yeah,
definitely has a
so
background with
like
that.
he has the background, and so does the Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso. But we didn't get that, and that really was one of the biggest letdown for me because like it really could have been like the first movie, but better, and it didn't. The tone was shifted different. I like the change in scenery and the change in location because it kind of helped with the movie, especially with being taking place in the South, and you get that that feel, especially once you get to that hotel, that grandeur-esque feel of the movie. But again, it just fell flat.
Let's talk about something here too, and that's going to be about the ending of the movie because this is where the major difference in this film really takes place is the ending. Your thoughts on that? Because we both
like
know they
that
talked
it's stuck
about
close to the source material.
Mhm.
At the end of the movie, the kids don't get changed back. They stay as mice, but they stick with the plan of all right, we're gonna have all this money and we're gonna take out the rest of the witches and get rid of these witches. So you kind of do see that follow up at the end of the movie that we didn't get in the last one, which
Yeah.
is a good point, a good highlight. That's one of the good points of the movie. But there's not really a but here. There's a but. The but was
Yeah.
kind of the final ending with how it still ended with the fact that Chris Tucker's performance really didn't really feel as connected to what the original character being played by the hero character
the
grandson.
actor, yeah. Well, to me, this felt like, hey, we got Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker, be Chris Tucker because this is going to help sell the movie because
Tucker, yeah.
you are Chris Tucker. I'm not Chris Tucker. I meant Chris Rock. Excuse me. My apologies. I meant to say Chris Rock. So Chris Rock, be Chris Rock because this is going to sell the film because people like your style of comedy and we think it'll work well for this children movie. And that was distracting for me personally. And again, Chris Rock is not a bad actor. From what I understand, his performance
he's
in
great
Fargo,
in Fargo.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at.
Fantastic in Fargo, and that's what I think that's what took me out of the film, the beginning, because that's what I was expecting going in, but I didn't get that. I was like, oh well, never mind.
Yeah. So, and that to me was this is where like you can tell some of the studio heads are like, hey, we got Anne Hathaway, let her be wild. We got Octavia Spencer, who's known for playing these kind of really caring characters, and let's stick with that. Stanley Tucci, great actor, make him just a little awkward, but not too awkward. And Chris Rock, let Chris Rock be Chris Rock, and that's what's going to work. It didn't work all that well. All those ingredients in this movie, which should have worked, but didn't work. Maybe if Chris Rock was the hotel manager, it would have probably worked there. Maybe that would have worked better, and maybe Stanley Tucci will not because the character is black, so let's not do that. But another actor, maybe someone like John David Washington, who was great in Black Klansman. Maybe we can probably use him in a film like this to help narrate the film. Denzel Washington, if you want to go high-power actors, maybe he's someone like him who can tell that story because he definitely has that voice and that effect you could have by hearing the narration with his voice and telling something that's very telling his experiences of what he went through and then where he ends up now.
The one thing I like, it had that storybook feel to it.
I agree.
It did. But with the fact the narration was so over the top, I took away from that storybook sound. And
it took you out of the element of what they were trying to establish there. And that's the unfortunate thing, too, for me. I had a lot of problems with the movie, but the thing is that the movie is not bad looking. It's not horribly structured. It's not horribly executed. It's just the execution of how they wanted to create this narrative here fell flat in a lot of areas because it seemed like even with the special effects now with the mice, although it's great to see them, the characters speak
more emotion,
and they have a little more physicality, and I thought it worked well, but it looked fake, and that kind of took me out of the picture. Even when Octavia Spencer, her character as grandmother, talks to these mice, there is nothing there that I know she's reacting to, and you could tell. You could tell that she's okay. Look at this mark. That's where the mice is going to be at, and then look at that mark. That's where the other one's going to be at. And I want you to interact with that. And you can kind of tell it just wasn't very. it didn't seem really authentic to me. Whereas in the other film, The Grandmother, she has something tangible to look at and has that interaction. The animatronics in there as well too. You can feel that authenticity, that something is there, and she's connecting with that living being there. And there, you can tell that there's nothing there, and she's just reacting and doing a good job being an actress, reading those lines to nothing there. That is what was a sticking point here for me. And the special effects, although Robert Zemeckis does a great job in using special effects, this wasn't one of his best, I believe.
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
Agreed.
So,
well, I mean, that's it, man. That's pretty much our.
We're pretty much like shitting on this movie. We know it's good.
Sorry.
We know it's potentially good, but God, it's just like it was a really disappointing.
So much potential that just fell flat. That's pretty much it. That's our final thoughts. This movie had so much potential going for it. The acting performances by Octavia Spencer and Hathaway, fantastic job. Stanley Tucci, great job. Shout out to
the actor who played the grandson.
The grandson, I believe his name is. Let's see, what is his name? Jazir Kadim Bruno. Fantastic job, kiddo. I want to see more of this kid.
Yeah, I do too.
Especially with the voice acting, I think he has a long some good jobs coming up for him, voice acting wise as well. He was believable. And let's see.
So would you want to give this how would you go about recommending?
That's what I was gonna let's see what would be the rating here that I want to get into. It's not a bad film. It's not. The acting is great. The acting is worth enough at all, but I think it's more, check it out. Like, if you're a fan of the book, check it out. This is more of a family film, I think. If you want to watch this with your kids, definitely watch it with the kids, but I think it's just a one-stop shop, and that's it. I wouldn't go back to it.
That's a good way of doing it. So, I think it's worth a shot, and then however you want to take it from there, to each their own, I would say. But all right, so those are our overall thoughts on the film. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you like the original one better? Did you like this one better? I'd be curious to find out if anyone actually liked this movie better than the original. Very, very hard pressed to believe that someone would actually say that. But if you're one of those few people, please let us know in the comment section down below. And while you're here, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Help us spread our numbers out there to get to 1,000 subscribers, because we're working really hard to try to create new content for you guys to watch and enjoy. Also, make sure you share and like our videos as well too. And check our social media accounts as well. We have a Facebook and Instagram page simply at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And you can follow myself over here on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, and on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob the Movie Guy. And for you, good sir, where can they follow you?
Well, you can follow me at my Instagram and on my Twitter at DavinIsDisaster. You can also follow me on our personal Facebook page, Devin A. Estacado. We'll talk about anything else, indie wrestling, comic books, movies, any other stuff that I'm into, and a bunch of other memes and stuff that I like to share regarding pop culture and everything else that I'm into. And sometimes see me get into it with Rob about, pop culture, movies, and other stuff. But that being said, if you love what me and Rob do here, if you really enjoy this, please, like you said earlier, hit that like, subscribe button. Please check out the other channels that we have. What the NRW crew is doing. We have our boy Kuya P with his show and his reviews. He just finished up his torturous review of Raised by Wolves, and he's starting up on his review for Utopia. So definitely give that a check out. Also check out with the Nerds of Color, his show, the Show Pie Show. Definitely check that out. We'll definitely have other stuff coming down the pipeline, along with our reviews of everything else spoopy coming down the down the pipeline. The spoopy season ain't over yet. We're still trying to get through it to a Halloween release of some other stuff that we got going on. But definitely check that out.
All right, guys, and until next time, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your viewership, and remember, spread the word that is New Release Wednesdays. And until next time, stay safe out there.
Cheers.